Because you're now recording your own webinars and setting them up, we'll want to walk through some of the settings that come along with webinars. So first, you'll want to navigate over to your actual webinars tab. And here's where you can see, similar to your regular Zoom account, all of the webinars that you have scheduled on your account. This account has quite a few webinars on it, so we'll walk through actually creating a new webinar just so we can use for some testing. Go ahead and select Schedule a Webinar. And here's where you'll want to put in a topic. I recommend you be pretty specific about what the topic is. So if it's a particular event, put the name of the event and maybe the date or something so that you know exactly what that webinar is for. We tend to have webinars that are the same that may be run in sequence. We potentially can confuse them with another one, possibly set up the wrong one or send out the wrong information. So I always say, be specific in your topic about exactly what this webinar is. Just like setting up a meeting, you can come through and determine the date and time, duration, as well as if it's going to be reoccurring, similar to a meeting. The next thing you have control over is if you're going to do registration. This is also just like a typical meeting. You have the ability to get a link for registration, and in doing so, you can send that link out and have people actually register for your webinar. This is great if you're going to post it on a public website or social media of some sort. This way, people kind of have to go through an extra step before they actually can get into your meeting itself. You also have the webinar passcode. We recommend that you use passcodes for all of your meetings and webinars. You are able to customize this, so I can make it whatever I really want that password to be. Sometimes it's nice to coincide with whatever the meeting title is, and have the webinar passcode be that way. Now, video, we're used to seeing hosts and participants here, but now we're seeing hosts and panelists. So host is actually the creator of the account, or is the account itself. So, for this instance, it's going to be Zoom 4. So I can determine, do I want that video to be on or off? And for me, I'm going to go ahead and say, no, I want my folks to focus on the panelists, not me. And then obviously the video for the panelists. Do you want the panelists video to be seen or not? And the hope is that you do, so that they can, so that your attendees can see their photos. The next one's audio, and just like with meetings, it is set to both, and it's locked in that way. That way, if people need to dial in by phone, or if they're using their computer audio, they can do either one. So we just keep it locked at both. The webinar options is something that we take a little more time on. The first one is Q&A, and I like to remind people that if you don't have this selected, the only real way for them to ask questions is through chat. They can't unmute their microphone and ask questions and things of that nature. So I always say that it's a great option to have that Q&A available on your webinar, so I always recommend that one. The next is Enabled Practice Session, and I really like this setting so that I can get into my meeting ahead of time and try out, make sure I understand all of the tools that are available to me, check any of the settings before I actually take my meeting live. So I always recommend adding a practice session in there, even if it's just you getting in a few moments before your actual meeting is scheduled. That's a great way to kind of just make sure you're comfortable in the space. The next one's only authenticated users can join, and similar to meetings, this is a tricky one because that means they will have had to have signed into their trinity.zoom.us account before they can actually log into your meeting. So if this is going to be for parents or potential students, they're not going to be authenticated users. So this really isn't a great option for all meetings. Make webinar on demand is useful if you're going to be pushing it out to things like Facebook Live, YouTube, kind of YouTube Live, things of that nature. If you're going to be doing some of those, you want to make sure that you select Make the Webinar on Demand. And then finally, automatically record the webinar. By automatically recording the webinar, it's going to go into your webinar cloud, and you'll be able to access it automatically. You also have the option to record it once you actually get into the webinar, so that's really up to you, your personal preference. So that's most of the settings that you need to think about when you're thinking about the webinar options and just how you're setting up your meeting. The final one here is going to be alternative hosts. And so this is where you can type in email addresses and add them in as alternative hosts. So if you aren't able to make the meeting, or if someone else needs to lead this meeting in particular, you can definitely put them here. And then you just want to go ahead and select schedule. Now, if it does not go through in schedule, it's going to tell you why. So in this case, it's my password's not strong enough. So we'll go ahead and change it up a little bit and make that a stronger password. I can go ahead and select schedule. Once it is scheduled, you'll come out to a page very similar to the way that you send the information that you get when you do a regular meeting. So these are, this is all of the information about the actual meeting itself. You know, because I've selected that JLS1 is an alternative host, it sent an invitation to them, letting them know that that person is an alternative host for this meeting. So that's really helpful. If by chance, you know, I said that I didn't get that, I could always resend that invitation. This also just talks about kind of some of the, shows you the kind of the overview of the settings that you selected. But what's really great is you can come down here and now you can really customize what the invitation is going to look like. If you're going to send out emails about the webinar as reminders or things of that nature, if someone registered and didn't actually attend, you can send them an email. If you want to change the contact information for the emails, you can do all of that. Branding is great because you can also add in photos so that when you know, the webinar is kicking off, it's got those photos or logos or banners, as well as just kind of like other information. You can add a speaker in here if you wanted to do that. You can change the theme. There's, you know, post attendees, URLs. There's all kinds of really great information. If you wanted to add in a survey, there's actually now a tab for polls and surveys. So you can create polls or surveys to then launch within your webinar. Q&A, this is just showing you the settings that you will also have available within the actual meeting itself. And you can edit those ahead of time, which is great. And then under more, it just shows you where it's integrated, or if there are any integrations. And then if you want to live stream it, some of the options that you have for live streaming. And then, you know, just a couple of the more options down here. If your webinar reaches over its 500 or 1,000 limit, kind of what happens then. At any time, you can edit this webinar. You can edit all of these settings that you have in here. So if you wanted to add in for the alternative hosts, if you had other panelists that you wanted to add in, that would be where you would add those in. So if I knew that Al and John and Hector were all going to be panelists for my webinar, I could go back in there, select edit this webinar, and add them in as well. So that is really the overview of the webinar itself and setting it up. Once again, just like a normal meeting, you are able to add it to your Google Calendar and things of that nature. Also, you're able to take and under email settings, you can email yourself the invitation, the registration link that folks would need. So really great stuff on this page itself.